The woman stepped off the stagecoach, with nothing but a worn carpetbag and eyes that had seen too much. Thomas Mitchell watched from his porch, his coffee growing cold in his hands. $2. That's all the marriage broker had asked, $2 for a bride who'd worked the land and asked no questions. But when she turned toward his ranch house, the world tilted sideways. 23 years dissolved like morning frost. The same green eyes that used to peek at him over their mother's apron, the same stubborn chin that had gotten her into trouble when she was barely tall enough to reach the kitchen table. Sarah, his little sister Sarah, who'd vanished during the Cherokee raids when she was 7 and he was 15. The cup slipped from his hands, shattering against the porch boards. She froze at the sound, her gaze finding his across the dusty yard. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then recognition flickered across her face. Not joy, not relief, but something closer to terror. "No," she whispered, loud enough for him to hear. "This can't be happening." Thomas rose slowly, his legs unsteady, the marriage papers crinkled in his back pocket. Papers that bore the name Sarah Coleman, the name she'd taken from whatever family had claimed her after the raids. Papers that made her his legal wife as of this morning. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell," he said, his voice barely carrying across the space between them. She dropped her bag. "I go by Sarah Coleman now. I have for 16 years. The stagecoach driver cleared his throat. "This your place, ma'am, 'cause I got a schedule to keep." Sarah's eyes never left Thomas's face. "Yes," she said finally, "this is my place." The driver tipped his hat and climbed back onto his perch, leaving them alone with the weight of an impossible truth. Brother and sister, husband and wife, 2 signatures on a legal document that had just become their shared nightmare. Thomas stepped off the porch, each footfall echoing in the silence. She didn't run, though he could see she wanted to. Instead, she squared her shoulders the way she always had when facing something that terrified her. "We need to talk," he said. "No," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We need to disappear." Inside the cabin, they sat on opposite sides of the rough wooden table like strangers negotiating a truce. The marriage certificate lay between them, its official seal mocking their predicament. "The broker said you were from Kansas," Thomas said, studying her face for traces of the girl he'd mourned. "He said your husband died of fever." "My husband did die." Sarah's voice carried no warmth. "James Coleman was a good man. He found me half dead after," she gestured vaguely, "after everything. His family took me in when the Cherokee band that captured me traded me to a settlement. I never told them my real name." Thomas reached across the table, stopping short of touching her hand. "Sarah, I looked for you. For 3 years I rode through every territory, every settlement. I thought you were dead. Maybe it would have been better if I was." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Don't say that. You paid $2 for a wife, Thomas. $2. Her laugh held no humor. "Do you know what that makes me? It makes you my sister. It makes me your legal wife. According to these papers, according to the law." She picked up the certificate, her hands shaking now. "We can't just pretend this didn't happen. The broker knows. The territorial office has records. If we try to run, then we'll explain, tell them the truth." Sarah's green eyes flashed. "The truth, that you bought your own sister as a mail-order bride. That'll be a fine story for the Sunday sermon." Thomas stood pacing to the window. Outside, his few cattle grazed in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the storm brewing inside his home. He'd built this place with his own hands, carved out a living from nothing, all while carrying the guilt of failing to protect his little sister. "There has to be a way," he said. "There's only one way that doesn't end with both of us in prison or run out of the territory." Sarah folded the papers carefully. "We honor the contract, publicly and privately." She met his eyes. "We figure out how to live with what we've done." The sound of approaching horses cut through their conversation. Thomas moved to the window, his blood chilling at what he saw. "3 riders," he said quietly, "coming fast. One of them's wearing a badge." Sarah joined him at the window, and he felt her go rigid beside him. "That's Marshall Hendricks. The broker must have sent word about the marriage. Is that bad?" Her face had gone pale as winter sky. "Thomas, there's something else you need to know. James Coleman didn't die of fever. Sarah said, her voice barely audible over the approaching hoofbeats. He was shot by his brother over money from a land deal gone wrong. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. Sarah, what are you saying? The marshal thinks I killed him. I ran before they could arrest me. The marriage broker in Dodge City didn't ask questions, just took my money and found me a husband far enough away from Kansas. She gripped his arm. If Hendricks recognizes me. The riders pulled up outside, dust swirling around their horses' hooves. Through the window, Thomas could see Marshal Hendricks dismounting, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. The other two men looked like bounty hunters, hard faces, harder eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, Hendricks called out, like to have a word. Thomas moved toward the door, but Sarah caught his sleeve. Let me handle this. If he suspects anything, I'm not letting you face this alone. You don't have a choice. Sarah straightened her dress, smoothing wrinkles that weren't there. 23 years ago, you couldn't protect me from raiders. Don't make the same mistake twice. Before he could respond, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Thomas watched through the window as she transformed. Her posture changed. Her voice took on a different cadence when she spoke. Marshal Hendricks, she said warmly, what brings you all the way out here? Routine check, ma'am. Territorial office sent word about your marriage. Just making sure everything's legitimate. One of the bounty hunters leaned forward in his saddle. She matches the description, Marshal. Same height, same hair color. Thomas's hand moved instinctively to the rifle above the mantelpiece. Sarah laughed, the sound natural and easy. Description, gentlemen, I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. Hendricks pulled a folded paper from his vest. Sarah Coleman, wanted for questioning in the death of James Coleman in Wichita. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I'm Sarah Mitchell now, she replied steadily, and I've never been to Wichita in my life. The lie came so smoothly that even Thomas almost believed it, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she clasped them behind her back. Mind if we come inside? Hendricks asked. Just to talk? Of course not. Sarah stepped back, gesturing them forward. My husband's inside. He can vouch for my character. As the three men climbed the porch steps, Thomas understood with crystal clarity that the next few minutes would determine whether Sarah lived or died, and whether he'd lose his sister a second time. The cabin felt smaller with 5 people crowded inside. Marshal Hendricks took off his hat, his eyes scanning the simple furnishings while the bounty hunters flanked the door. Thomas stood beside the fireplace, close enough to reach his rifle if needed. Nice place you got here, Hendricks said conversationally. How long you two been married? This morning, Thomas replied, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. Sarah came in on the afternoon stage. Bit of a whirlwind romance then. Hendricks studied Sarah's face. Funny thing about that stage, driver said the lady didn't seem too pleased to arrive. Sarah moved to Thomas's side, slipping her hand into his with practiced ease. The touch sent a shock through him. Not romantic, but the profound recognition of shared blood, shared history, pre-wedding nerves, she said with a shy smile. I'd never seen my husband except in a photograph. Wasn't sure what to expect. And what did you expect? Hendricks asked. Thomas felt Sarah's fingers tighten on his. In that pressure he read a message as clear as words. Trust me, someone harder, she said softly, looking up at Thomas with an expression that nearly broke his heart. Someone who wouldn't understand that sometimes people need a fresh start. It was then that Thomas saw it, a small scar on her temple, barely visible beneath her hair, a scar that hadn't been there when she was 7. How many other marks did she carry? How many other wounds from the years he'd failed to protect her? Fresh start, Hendricks repeated. That's what everyone wants, I suppose. Problem is, the past has a way of catching up. One of the bounty hunters stepped forward. Ma'am, would you mind rolling up your sleeves? Sarah's hand went instinctively to her left wrist. I beg your pardon. Sarah Coleman had a distinctive birthmark. Right here, he tapped his own wrist. Shaped like a crescent moon. Thomas remembered that birthmark, had kissed it better when Sarah scraped her arm climbing trees. had helped their mother trace its shape when Sarah was learning letters. "I'm not Sarah Coleman," she said firmly, "and I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal in my own home." "Just roll up the sleeve," the bounty hunter pressed. "Clear this up real quick." Thomas saw Sarah's slight nod, the same gesture she'd used as a child when she'd made up her mind about something. She began rolling up her left sleeve, slowly, her eyes never leaving Hendrix's face. The crescent-shaped birthmark was clearly visible on her pale skin. Hendrix sighed, reaching for his handcuffs. "Sarah Coleman, you're under arrest for..." "Wait." Thomas stepped between them, his heart hammering. "Marshal, before you do anything permanent, there's something you should know about my wife. She's my sister." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Hendrix froze with the handcuffs halfway out of his belt. The bounty hunters exchanged glances. "Come again," Hendrix said. Thomas moved to his trunk in the corner, pulling out a small wooden box he hadn't opened in years. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a daguerreotype, their family portrait from 1851. He handed it to the marshal. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, taken by Cherokee raiders in 1854, when she was 7. I've been looking for her ever since." Thomas's voice grew stronger with each word. "I didn't know who she was when I arranged the marriage. The broker said she was Sarah Coleman, a widow from Kansas." Hendrix studied the photograph, his eyes moving between the image and Sarah's face. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting her head when thinking. "This doesn't change the fact that she's wanted for murder," one bounty hunter said. "Self-defense." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "James's brother Frank came after me when James changed his will. Frank shot James when he tried to protect me. I ran because I knew no one would believe a woman over a Coleman. That family owns half of Wichita." Hendrix looked at the photograph again, then at Thomas. "You swear this is your sister, on our parents' graves?" The marshal was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Funny thing about family, makes people do things they wouldn't normally do, like a brother marrying his long-lost sister by accident." He tucked the photograph into his vest. "Also funny how sometimes witnesses remember things different when they're asked the right questions." He looked at the bounty hunters. "Boys, I think we made a mistake. This lady doesn't match our description after all, but the birthmark, lots of people have birthmarks." Hendrix's tone brooked no argument. "We'll be heading back to town now." After they left, Thomas and Sarah sat in silence as the sun set through the cabin windows. Finally Sarah spoke. "We can't stay married, I know, but we can't just disappear either. People will talk." Thomas nodded. "We'll figure it out. Maybe you could be my housekeeper, my widowed sister-in-law who came to help after her husband died." Sarah almost smiled. "Sarah Coleman Mitchell, recently widowed. It could work. It'll have to work." Years later, when Sarah was old and gray and telling stories to her grandchildren, Thomas's children, born to him and the school teacher he eventually married, she would remember that afternoon as the day she learned something important about family. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones willing to sacrifice everything, even their reputation, to keep you safe. Sometimes coming home means accepting that the past can't be unchanged, only forgiven. And sometimes, just sometimes, $2 can buy something more precious than a wife or a fresh start. Sometimes it can buy back a sister's life. The evening light painted the cabin walls gold as Thomas built up the fire, and Sarah began planning their new story, the one they'd tell the world, and the one they'd live with in the quiet spaces between words. Outside, the wind carried no sound of approaching riders, only the gentle lowing of cattle and the promise of tomorrow.